Marcus Rashford stars for Barcelona in a Champions League game against Newcastle in a 2-1 victory as Barcelona take all 3 points. There was a few tactical problems for Newcastle, but unfortunately Barcelona and Hansi Flick couldn't fully take advantage of that. Although Barcelona struggled with the press of Newcastle, later on things did balance as we saw Pedri and Frenkie take control of the game. But let's get right into it, and as always, do subscribe for more tactical football content. Right from the get-go, Hansi Flick acknowledged the fact that Newcastle was probably out to prove a point. That's why you would see Garcia right from the get-go try to play the ball straight into Lewandowski, where he would lay it off. Because in the build-up phase when Barcelona looked to split their centre-backs, Newcastle committed a whopping 7 players into the press, meaning they only probably had 2 or 3 players back, because they didn't want Barcelona to play comfortably out from the back, and they also mainly targeted Gerard Martin. Flick is just a breath of fresh air, man, because look how he instructs Garcia to kick long, even from the second minute. With Xavi, we all know that he would have forced the players to play out from the back in that instance. The ball was played into Lewandowski, and then Rashford and Firmino would go on to the second ball. This really gives Barca the element of adaptability and unpredictability, because we don't only rely on playing out from the back. And you can see Gerard Martin was the weak link in the team as he was a pressing trigger. But for the most part, we didn't really have a problem with that. It was obvious that Gerard Martin was the pressing trigger for Newcastle, because when they played the ball into him, they would immediately press him. But him and Rashford did a really great job of playing the ball into each other, and Gerard Martin would then run in order to receive the ball back from him. While on the right hand side, you could see there was a real hesitance on whether or not to press Jules Koundé, since there's Anthony Elanga didn't really go on to him, right? And then you could see Araujo obviously sometimes would play the ball straight into somebody like Firmino, where he would lay the ball off to Jules Koundé. So that's the 2 ways that Barcelona tried getting out of the press. Maybe it's just me, but there was a certain level of reluctance from Newcastle's side to press Jules Koundé. Maybe because he's a little bit better on the ball than Gerard Martin. But you would see them play the ball into Fermin Lopez, and then he would play it on to Koundé as well, which is from the centre-back straight into Fermin and then into Jules Koundé. Gerard Martin has really come a long way, as he is really doing well under pressure since he's a La Masia graduate, and the fact that people don't have a lot of patience with him. But he did really well with Marcus Rashford, where they would play the ball into him and then he would give it off to Rashford, and then he would make a run again to be able to receive the ball and progress the ball. Eddie Howe acknowledged the fact that they were probably not going to keep up pressing Barcelona high constantly like they wanted to. So you would see that they did move into a 4-1-4-1 situation, where these lines became extremely static and flat, which is going to be a factor later on in the game. But they also morphed it into a type of 4-4-2 situation, but at all times they would want to keep tabs on Frenkie de Jong and Pedri, as they marked them extremely high. Eddie Howe was really smart in the way he conducted this, because he knew that he wouldn't be able to keep up a pressure like that for the whole 90 minutes. So there was instances where they had a 4-1-4-1 situation going on, where the team would just focus on pressing the midfielders, especially Frenkie de Jong and Pedri. I can guarantee you that in the few games coming up, you would see this way more often than you would normally see it, where Pedri and Frenkie de Jong will be marked to death. And I have full trust in these players that they will be more than capable of slipping past these people. Around the 15-minute mark is where Barcelona really started getting a hold onto the game, as Frenkie de Jong and Pedri, but Frenkie in particular, started getting more involved and also keep onto the ball a little bit more longer and be a little bit more press resistant, as they were dragging Newcastle out of position. And this is where the staticness became really apparent, as they would more often than not be in these straight lines and flat lines, as Frenkie de Jong started moving into these areas getting on the ball, and then Firmino was having a field day in between the lines receiving the ball. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I actually posted a short saying that I think Casado should be playing in this game because of the physicality, and boy was I wrong, because Frenkie de Jong was so good at receiving the ball in between the lines and dropping back all the way to the center backs, where they could actually get on the ball. And Pedri and Frenkie is extremely press resistant, and this is actually what regained the positioning and also the possession and also control over the game, and this is where the game started changing for Barca. This must have done something to the confidence of Newcastle, because they just went into the shell defending in a low block, and this straightness and the flatness of this line was bugging me out. And now you would start seeing Rashford getting into these areas, and also Fermin into the half spaces receiving the ball in between the lines. It is just a pity that somebody like Lamine Yamal wasn't playing, because I can guarantee you that bro would have taken advantage of these areas and also the spaces that he would receive in between the lines. It does seem as though Newcastle did lose their shape a little bit as they went into their shells, because of the dominance Barcelona was asserting now on them, especially with the control and the press resistance. But here you can see Rashford was starting to move in between the lines as well from the half space, which is great, because look at that straight line of defense for their midfield, which was crazy, the staticness. And you can see Rashford again getting in behind the midfield line. And that straight line of their midfield, the staticness is astonishing to me, seeing that Eddie Howe is such a great manager. And look at how Fermin effortlessly got into spaces where Newcastle wouldn't want him. But unfortunately, Barcelona couldn't really take advantage. Later in the second half, we did see Eddie Howe make a slight change by moving these players more centrally in order to stop the central progression from Barcelona. But it was to no avail, as they were still finding these players in between the lines and actually pulling them, and the movement was too much to handle as well. Eddie Howe did realize his mistake in the staticness and the straight line of his midfield line, so he had his players a little bit like next to each other, almost like in a 4-4-2 situation. But Fermin could still receive the ball in between the lines, and I don't think they had control over this, as Barcelona's movement is one of the best in the world at the moment. In the second half, when Barcelona looked to build up, once again Gerard Martin was still the weak point, as they would try to press the ball as the ball would go into him. And Newcastle started committing a lot of players into the Barcelona half a lot more as well. As mentioned earlier, Gerard Martin was the pressing target for Newcastle, because he did lose the ball in those earlier stages of the second half. He did lose the ball in crucial areas. There was two ways that Barcelona dealt with this. The first one was to go long straight into Firmino or Lewandowski, which is why I love Hansi Flick. He's probably the most adaptable coach ever. But they would also play the ball into Jules Koundé, where Rafinha would come and collect it, and if he gets pressed by Livramento, then Firmino would come into these areas and receive the ball and look to switch it over to Marcus Rashford. Over here we see Koundé with the ball as he plays it into Rafinha, and Rafinha would come and collect the ball, the same like Gerard Martin did with Marcus Rashford on the other side. And you see that Fermin Lopez was waiting there as he would just load off the ball, receive the ball from Rafinha as they would just get the ball up the pitch. Now this is how I feel like Flick is trying to let people not be able to stop whatever we do. Kick long, play out from the back, and Fermin was allowed to drive up the pitch as well with the dribbling, and where he would cross the ball to the other side. In the second half, especially around the 60th minute, the space between the midfield line and the defense line for Newcastle just grew larger and larger and larger, and it was rather disappointing to see that Barcelona didn't really take advantage of the spaces in between the lines right here. But we did see later on Marcus Rashford did get the shot away from the area over there, because the space was so huge between the fence and the midfield line. Boy oh boy oh boy, look at that second line of defense, which is the midfield line. Look at the distance between the back line and the midfield line for Newcastle. I'm actually disappointed at Hansi Flick, especially since we are such a vertical side that we didn't take advantage of this. I mean, where is the likes of, I think Danny Olmo would have played good there, but yeah, look at how far Newcastle's front line midfield are from the back line. No wonder Barcelona grew into the game and they actually could score their goal. And you can see Rashford receiving the ball here, and Tonali was actually able to come and run back to actually defend against Barcelona. But yeah, very few chances taken from Barcelona. But that's the end of our video, guys. I hope you understood everything we talked about. I will drop some more tactical analysis videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, please do subscribe to the channel as well, as that will help us a lot to get this family to grow bigger. I know I say this a lot, but I will see you guys in the next one.